get into our 30 good minutes segment here in just a moment. But before we do that, just make sure that you hit that like button on Facebook. Make sure that you hit subscribe on YouTube so that you don't miss any of our episodes. And we're going to continue to go weekly here. I mean, obviously some news is starting to come out a little bit on what a season might look like. But our goal is to be here every Wednesday night, and we might adjust that depending on what is going on and with guests, with news, with different things like that. So we really appreciate you joining on. And right now, I think we're ready to go here. We are honored here at the Hockey Writers to welcome a former colleague of ours who's got an amazing story, from, kind of humble beginnings till now, coming up to being a play-by-play voice in the NHL. So let us introduce the great Mike Maniscalco and welcome him to the Hockey Writers Live. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Oh,
great is a huge overstatement. So,
not when it comes to you, though. I look up to you. A lot of people look up to you, and the running joke that I have on Twitter is just the best. Mike,
Mark,
exactly. And we really appreciate you coming on tonight. And just first off, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I've been getting that a lot. I've passed the 1 year anniversary of having Wilson the volleyball, as Tripp Tracy is like to call it, yanked out of me. And knock on wood, there have been no health setbacks. Everything is pretty good and straight ahead. I still have to be mindful of things. I'm not completely out of the woods yet, but I am not as deep into the forest as I once was. But things are going really good, Mark. Thank you.
That's really good to hear, especially in a pandemic like this. And just it's surreal. I'm sitting at home. You're probably sitting at home. In the month of November, we're normally out traveling, covering hockey. You're calling games. How surreal is it? And what kind of things are you doing to pass the time now?
Well, the wall behind me was a different color a few days ago. So a lot of home projects have been done. Thankfully, my wife has been the foreman and has overseen most of those. So I just get to be like a subcontractor, and that's fine. But for me, just staying up on the sport as much as I can. I watch the old games when I get the feeling to do so. But I don't know about you, Mark. It's kind of felt like me, like summer vacation, but we got the chicken pox or something. So, there's nothing to do. We're just kind of stuck indoors for a while. But I've found a way to keep myself entertained. And I'm with you. Every time I look at the calendar, there's this feeling we should be doing something else. But we keep looking forward. And I know that you get this question a lot, as do I. When's the season going to start, or what kind of season we're going to have? And believe me, folks, if we knew the answer, we would tell you right away. We're not keeping this secret, but hopefully we'll have something soon. But there's been a lot to occupy my time. And as you have a house or whatever, there's always a project, no matter what you're doing. There's always, you're on to something else.
And it's such a great point too, because this whole always something to do. There's this. I have my other job as well in health insurance, so it's just mandatory overtime right now. Given the time of the year, but it feels like summer, like you said. Even though now, funny story, up here in Erie, it was 75 degrees yesterday. It completely shattered a record high, so I literally felt like summer. But yeah, and you're right. We don't know anything. We're just like you fans. We just are waiting, just like everybody else. Hopefully a plan will come together. Hopefully people will do the right thing, make sure everybody is safe.
Yep.
But also at the same time, we could use a little bit of normalcy in our life, and hopefully in the right time that'll happen for us. So
yeah, that's honestly it, Mark. I think we're all looking for that. Although seeing I grew up in that part of the country where you are right now, enjoy those 75-degree days in November as much as you can. Take the dogs for longer walks if you can.
So. Yeah, we did, and it's already down 20 degrees, and it's going to continue to go down. So it's unfortunately getting back to hockey weather. But Mike, a lot of people. I love your story. Kind of coming from, like I said at the beginning, the humble beginnings to now, you're in one of the chairs in the NHL. just has it really hit you that you are the lead TV play-by-play voice of the Carolina Hurricanes?
The honest answer is no, because it's still going back to the playoffs. That didn't feel real. It felt one of these surreal moments. But I think the reason why it's been delayed on my end is we don't have a season there. There hasn't been the opportunity for me, to get into the rhythm, Mark, and get into the regular season. But at the same time, I know what's coming, and how I got here, it was not the straightest line. It was a little circuitous route to get to this, but I'm also very mindful of this job and how many people out there are equipped to do it and want to do this. And I know that I'm fortunate, but I've also in different ways put in the work to be ready for this job opportunity when it presented itself. And as the way things went, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, do I wish that certain circumstances were different of how this opportunity presented itself? Of course I do. But at the same time, the opportunity was there, and this was the thing that I wanted my entire life. This was the job. I wanted to be a play-by-play voice of a major league sports franchise, and be it hockey, football, basketball, baseball. That was the dream, and now that it's going to come true to fruition. I keep waiting for somebody to pinch me and say it's not going to happen. And I dropped this line the other day, Mark. So I don't know how many people will get the reference.
Okay.
But I keep waiting to go into the shower and see Bobby Ewing in there. The old Dallas thing where it was all just a dream. So if 10% of the audience gets that joke, thank you very much. But it's when you say surreal. Like if you would have told me, put out a list of people who would be up for, this job, I would like to think my name is on the long list for people who could be the Carolina Hurricanes play-by-play voice. But as far as everything that could happen, the perfect storm hit, and luckily enough, I'm with the Hurricanes, no pun intended on that one. But it hit, and when the seat opened up and they gave me the chance to fill it, I was not going to say no. That's the best way I can put it.
Exactly. The opportunity came, you put in the work, and anybody that's watching this, it doesn't matter what opportunity you're going after, put in the work. It will get noticed by the right people. Always, always, always.
Yeah.
Listen, I know you used to be with us, but at the same time, I'll watch Hurricanes games sometimes when the Columbus Blue Jackets aren't playing, and I'll intentionally turn in to watch you and your partner, Tripp Tracy. Can you just kind of give fans a sense of just, he's very knowledgeable, but at the same time, he seems like he's a real joy. Like, what is it about him that just makes it such a joy to work with?
I think it's the fact, Mark, that this is a man who loves life, and what you see is what you get. There is no act. Like people, the number one question is, well, what's he like off the air? I'm like, the exact same thing. I think that's what's great about him. He has, I'm going to go for our former Quebec Nordique fans. He has a joie de vivre. He just has this absolute joy and love of life. He's never met a stranger. Like, I mean, we could go anywhere and he will be best friends with somebody in 5 seconds. But he loves the game. He loves people. He has the heart of gold. As far as if anybody needs to know anything about Tripp Tracy, he is the guy who, when you talk about if you're in a foxhole or going down a dark alley, he's on the list, because you won't have to ask him. He'll just do it. He'll just be in there with you to try to get you out of it. And I think one of the things through the years that might have been overshadowed is his knowledge of the game, because of his personality is so big, and the things he's not afraid to say. He's not afraid, to put a comment out there that, will have us all, scratch our heads and be like, you went to Harvard, things like, but he's not afraid to do that. He's not afraid to have fun, but his hockey knowledge is outstanding. And for me, being put in the situation I was in, Mark, I don't think I could have asked for a better analyst to be there. And one, I've gotten to know Tripp very well over the years. I mean, that certainly helped, but he was just like, partner, call the game, and I'll handle the rest. And honestly, he took a lot of pressure off of my shoulders with his professionalism and what he was able to do. And then on top of that, he's a really good guy, and he made my life easy. But everybody asks, and the simple answer, Mark, is
Yep.
the guy you hear in those broadcasts is the exact same guy off the air.
It's genuine, and that's what it's all about too. And I'll never forget the moments. Like, I remember watching John and him when he's in Columbus. The moment that cannon go off, I mean, has he talked to you about his reaction to the cannon?
Oh, I'm aware of it. So I know that I might have to have my arm out there so he doesn't jump out of the booth if and when we get to go back on the road and call games. But oh yeah, it is well documented of Tripp's disdain for the cannon at Nationwide Arena, or at least for me, it's I don't want to get in trouble, but it always reminded me of when I would see it. Remember those cartoons when we were the kid? And there was the little dog that would yap and it would force the cat up on the ceiling, because it just always reminds me of that.
Oh, yes. No, classic.
It's true. And it's like every time, although he's gotten better about it over the years, he knows it's coming now.
Right, because I'm sure people have told him when it goes off, and if he does it enough, then. But I think every time I've seen him, he's still done a little shudder. So it's good stuff. Kind of last question along the broadcasting lines. You and Tripp both got to call playoffs in a pandemic. So not being able to go to Toronto, just how challenging was that for you, the broadcasting team, to be able to call games from hundreds and thousands of miles away?
The short answer is it was difficult at first, but then, like anything, you get used to it. For me, it was the first time I'd called games on television. I won't count the student-run TV that I'd actually did, games for basketball and for those days of yore. But what I will go back to is I didn't know anything different on the TV side as far as doing play-by-play. So it's not like I'd go in there and be like, oh, this is so much weirder for me to do a TV game off of a monitor. It was my first time doing it. Now, I did the playoffs the year before on radio when the Canes swept the Islanders. You'd always rather be there. And it's funny, but it's little things like height differences of players. When you're there in the building, you can notice it versus when it's on a screen, because it's two-dimensional. And if somebody turns their back to you and you're just looking at the logo at the crest, you're guessing, especially for the opponent who you're trying to figure out those first few games. So you learn how to simplify things. So the short answer was, it was a challenge at first, but then once you got into the rhythm, and then I think because it was the playoffs, Mark, it was going to be the Rangers for 3 to 5 games. It was going to be the Bruins for 4 to 7 games. You get to know the opponents better. There wasn't a ton of line jockeying and shuffling of the lineups between these, the two opponents in the playoffs. So you get to know them a little bit better. And then you just settle down and call the game. And once you get into a rhythm for play-by-play, it really is, for me, about finding a rhythm. And once you get into that rhythm and you're just able to, here's the action. And the guy who gave me the greatest piece of advice how to call games was Doc Emmerich. And this was this was 2 playoffs ago in the Eastern Conference Finals. Mike Emmerich sitting in a chair. Tripp and I are doing something for Fox Sports, because we were doing a pre and post around the broadcasts. And, I told Doc, hey, I got to do some radio games, and, maybe that opportunity will pop up again. What should I do if I get the chance? And sage advice from geniuses, Mark. His line was, just tell them what you see. That's all I do. Like, okay. Fair, one of the greatest ever, and that's it. I was expecting there's going to be some, Yoda wisdom, and then when you boil it down, it is Yoda wisdom, which is you just tell them what you see. And the whole line is, people, especially on TV, and that was the producer who I worked with for Fox, was awesome. Jim Malia is one of the best in the business, and he's a local guy. We're very lucky. Our director, Paul Henning, worked for Hockey Night in Canada and directed games for Hockey Night in Canada and big events. And so he knows the game. So everybody behind the scenes, and I can name all of our crew, but you've only got a little bit of time here, but everybody behind the scenes, Mark, once, because it was sort of new for them, but, Jim had done remote broadcasts before like that. Tripp had called something similar to it, but not really at that level. But Paul had. So everybody had kind of braced for like, okay, this is what we can expect, and here's what will happen. So there were contingency plans. But my thing is, if you go back and watch the Washington game, which was, the prep round, basically the preseason all over again. Like, I watched that game. I walked out of that game. I'm like, they got the hook. They're already coming in for the relief pitcher for me. They're not going to ask me back. But then when you get to it and you get comfortable with the broadcast, it's the people make the difference, and then it just really comes down to calling what you were seeing.
Absolutely. And fans, in case you're just joining in, it's episode 7 of the Hockey Writers Live. This is Mark Scheig, and we got Hurricanes broadcaster Mike Maniscalco with us. And Mike, I wanted to just, I think some fans are really curious about Tom Dundon, and what has he brought to the Hurricanes in your mind?
Well, I think the one thing that he brought in was a level of excitement and enthusiasm that the fan base hadn't had in a while. And I think a big part of it was, you take a look at the Canes on the roster side of things right now, they're only $1 million under the salary cap. So he put money into the on-ice product, into the organization. And the fact that, you hear all of the terms that are out there, he's a maverick, or, he was an outsider to the hockey business, but what the guy is, he's passionate about winning. He wants to win. So that's what he's brought to the organization. He has brought this, I want to win. Now, he might do things. The one thing about hockey that we love, I think, is the tradition. And I think one of the things about hockey is anybody who comes in and bucks tradition is kind of looked at, what are you doing here? You don't belong in this. Well, Tom Dundon came in, and I don't think that he was intentionally bucking tradition. He just has a way of doing things. And he brought an excitement level to the fan base that it had been missing, quite honestly, for a long time. And, I hate to bring this up, but the Sebastian Aho offer sheet last year from Montreal, I think that the fan base in years past would have been concerned of, would there have been a match? And for Tom Dundon, there was this concern, but for him, he said it all along. Like, anybody who was actually paying attention, said all along, they were going to pay Sebastian Aho. He was going to get his money. And if we can be perfectly honest, the Hurricanes should send Marc Bergevin a thank you card for the contract that they laid out, because they could have jacked that up a little bit more. So, but what he brought to the organization was a much needed, into the area, a much needed injection of excitement about the product and about hockey. And you know what? The Canes all of a sudden started showing up in the headlines on, NHL.com, or if you watched NHL Network, or if you were listening to, NHL Network radio, they were talking about the Canes. The Canes went from, oh, that's right, there's a team in Raleigh. And I'm not going to take a shot at any of the Canadian media out there, but when you're covering a team in a non-traditional market, you're always fighting that. And then especially you go further down south. He brought this sense of, I'm going to put this team on the map, make headlines, make them relevant again. And then by naming Rod Brind'Amour head coach and this team winning, the rest takes care of itself. Everything else is just on the peripheral. It's the fact that he became dedicated and put the pieces in place to give Rod Brind'Amour a chance to win. And more importantly, putting Rod Brind'Amour in behind the bench to give this organization a chance to find its identity, its culture. And that's where it came from there. Really long answer, but it's Tom Dundon. I could be talking for about 5 hours for what Tom has done. So.
Completely understandable. And it's a perfect segue actually to, want to ask you about Brind'Amour. Is there something different that he brings to the team, unlike maybe some other coaches that are out there?
I think the first thing is, Mark, when he walks in the room, everybody in that room knows what he's done. And he's been there and done that. From the captain of a Stanley Cup championship team, he played in the Olympics for Team Canada. This is a guy who's been in all-star games. This is a guy who's won postseason awards. But also in his career, he moved down to a third or a fourth line player. He has done everything that you would ask a hockey player to do. And I think that he has that, there's not a credibility card that you carry in your wallet, but he has it and he checks every box. And the other thing that he does is he doesn't give himself enough credit for how he coaches this team. But because he's been there, he's sat in that stall and he knows what buttons to push, who to talk to, how to talk to certain players. And then more importantly, I think what he's figured out is you get to this level, you just don't need to just jam everything down a player's throat today. You got to let the horses run a little bit. And I think that's why guys like playing for Rod Brind'Amour, most coaches go into a game expecting perfection from their players. We did this, we ran this in practice, we did these drills. Rod Brind'Amour goes into the game knowing you're going to make mistakes. And his whole thing is, if you're going to make a mistake, but at least it's an effort, you made an effort. It wasn't something lazy. You can make a mistake. How many times do you watch a rookie make a mistake and they get plastered to the bench for the rest of the game? Not for Rod Brind'Amour. Go out there, make the mistake. Now, if it keeps happening, you get an issue. And I think what he has brought to this team is the culture of winning. It's not enough to go in and want to win, or we want to be good, or we want to be a playoff team. You go in expecting to win the game. You go in expecting that at the end of the year, you're going to be one of the teams playing for the Stanley Cup. He brought that back into the locker room, instilled that into those players. And honestly, Mark, talking about another guy, if I said I could talk about Tom Dundon for 4 hours, I could talk about Rod Brind'Amour for 24. He just, seriously, he is a great person, and everybody in that locker room respects him. And I think what is unbelievable about Rod Brind'Amour is the respect that he shows everybody. To everybody. And I think it's plain to see. He's been a joy to cover. I've covered him as a player and now as a coach. He is just an absolute, I'm going to use a Tripp Tracy line here. He is a salt of the earth human being. But he knows how to push the right buttons for players because he's been there. And he's like, he goes, when a guy makes a mistake, they don't need me to let him know that. He goes, and the problem is if they need me to let him know that, then I don't need him on the team anymore. So it's just how he knows how to read the room. And coaching too. It all depends on the team you have. But wouldn't you say, because who you've been around it? I mean, if you're around Torts, you understand John Tortorella. I think that there's this rep that we see of John Tortorella dealing with the media and all this, but then you talk to, it's kind of like Bill Belichick. You talk to the players who play for him after their career. And they talk about what he does behind the scenes and how good he is with that. I think coaching now, you're more a psychologist and a motivator than you are, a taskmaster, the way that it used to be.
Yeah, Torts is a great call out by you, because the big thing that he's about is leadership, and anybody that you speak to. I know he gets the rap in the media, and sometimes we only get maybe 30 seconds after the game with him, but he openly admits that he's not good at post game because he wears his emotions on his sleeves and, doesn't give cliche. And I think that's sometimes a breath of fresh air, but when you actually sit and talk with him, he is so knowledgeable, and he is one of the best interviews when you can get him on a one-on-one situation. And that's a side that a lot of fans and whatnot, they don't get to see that. So coaching's huge, like you said. That's well said. So, Mike, the last time we left the Carolina Hurricanes, they unfortunately got knocked out by the Boston Bruins, second year in a row. So my question for you is, what do the Hurricanes need to do in order to get to the next level? Because it seems like they have a lot of the right pieces in place, but they need to get over that hump. What do they have to do?
I think one of the things that this team, if you go and take a look at the results this year, they lost 4-1 to the Boston Bruins in the first round of the playoffs, although the qualifying round to me was the playoffs too, Mark. So, the Canes won a playoff series, even though I won't get into the technicalities of what the NHL wanted to label everything exactly. But if you look at the series this year versus the Eastern Conference Finals 2 years ago, they got beat 4-1. And on paper, you're like, well, that's not close. Every one of those games was a coin flip. It seemed like going into the third period or with 10 minutes to go. So I think what they had to learn is there is no off switch for 5 minutes in the playoffs. And I think they learned that from the Eastern Conference Finals and that run the year before. And I think they learned that again, because when you see what the Bruins do, when you go up against that team, year after year, and you realize this is what they're doing, this is the sacrifices they're making, what their best players do to win games, that rubs off on players like Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, the young guys. And I think the experience was part of it. But what do they have to do? They've got to be more consistent. And that's one thing everybody, will always preach, but you can't have a breakdown. And I'll go to the Patrice Bergeron goal in Game 5. The second period's running out, and he's behind the net. There's only one play for Bergeron, and he's going to try to bank it off of Peter Mrazek. He does. But that's one of those things where guys look up at the clock and they think, well, the period's over, not Bergeron. You have to finish things. You have to pay attention to those details. One of the other things, too, I think some more consistency in scoring. It just can't be one line. If you're going to be a team that makes a run and goes and tries to win the Stanley Cup, you have to have consistent scoring outside of that top line that you have. I thought the power play was pretty good. So, we can talk about tinkering with things like that. But for the Canes next year, whoever is flanking Vincent Trocheck, that line, that second line, however you want to call it, they have to be dangerous. They have to be a line that is going to chip in a goal in games like that. Defensively, I think they're fine. I think that not that it's – I want people, of course, if you're play-by-play guys or you're associated with a team, people will hear things and think, oh, really, that's the comment you're saying. But I think people forget Brett Pesce wasn't in this playoffs at all for the Carolina Hurricanes on their back end. Now, I'm not saying that they would have beat the Boston Bruins with Brett Pesce, a healthy Brett Pesce, but I think that one of those games, there's the third period where they give up 4 goals. Yep. Maybe that doesn't go that way if you've got Brett Pesce, because you can mix and match your D a little bit more than what you wanted to. So, they have these pieces, and now it's just a case of just finding, I think, more consistency in that second scoring punch, wherever it could be. Maybe it's going to be Marty Necas is what will be his true sophomore season. Maybe Vincent Trocheck captures that all-star potential that he had down in Florida from that one year. But those are the things for me, Mark, that stand out for the Hurricanes to take that next step.
Absolutely. 2 more for you here, Mike. So one player that is no longer there was obviously a huge part of everything, and someone you could probably talk about for hours, just like you did with Brind'Amour and Dundon, is Justin Williams. How much are the Hurricanes going to miss him?
Well, they had a little taste of life without him this year, because you remember he didn't retire last year. He stepped away from the game and left the door open. And I would love to tell you that, they passed every test without him, but you miss a guy like that a lot. And one, I think people will take a look at and say, well, how much did he have left in the tank? Remember, he was on a 5-game goal scoring streak when we hit pause on the NHL, going all the way back into April. So he was still playing at a level that is of a guy who can contribute on the ice every single night. But it's the off the ice things that he brought to this team, Mark, the when to say something, sometimes when not to say something, how to talk on the bench, how to be that guy for the young guys to, set the example to. There's a reason why Justin Williams' locker was put next to Sebastian Aho. There was a reason why young guys in the room, if you walked in and Justin Williams was in there, eyes were on Justin Williams, how he dealt with the media, how he's putting on his skates, how he was walking through the room. You can't put enough of a qualifier of what he means to the team. And, in today's day and age, we all love analytics and we want to measure everything. Yep. He is truly the one guy that the immeasurables are immense, and you cannot quantify it and say, well, this is, what he meant to the team per win, per win. I wish I could, but I know that there are going to be some guys who are going to, in the future, who played with Justin Williams these past 2-3 years for the Carolina Hurricanes, are going to be talked about the way Justin Williams is by this group, because they're going to learn from him. And they've got, I think Jordan Staal is going to be a better captain. And he was a better captain this last year, as far as being a little bit more vocal. And he's one of those players that I don't think gets enough credit, because he doesn't put in 35, but he plays heavy minutes. But for Justin Williams, just the mere fact of he could walk through the door and like that, know the right thing to say, Mark. And I've said this a few times. Selfishly, I'm going to miss him because I'm just going to miss talking to the guy. And you didn't have to talk hockey with him, just talking about anything with him. Having guys like that in the locker room, I think, are extremely valuable, especially in a sport where a team gets so tight-knit the way a hockey team does.
No, most definitely. And my final question for you, put you on the spot a little bit. Don't know how the divisions are going to work out. I mean, could keep the Metro, or they could be some realignment, especially with the border in Canada or whatnot. I look at it, if we're comparing the Penguins, if we're comparing the Capitals, I feel like the Hurricanes are ready to win a division. Do you see it that way too?
Yeah, I think, of course, like you said, we got to see what – do you know what it's going to look like? Because if you can give me the list, I can give you
Let me give you the list. Okay, there is no list.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. I thought you were hiding. I think who gets put in their division matters when we talk about, like, if certain things are realigned. Like if the Tampa Bay Lightning are in the division, you know, I've got to put them as a favorite no matter what, no matter where they are to win. But, yeah, I think this team is ready for that next step. You still have to overtake Washington, and I think that the hiring of Peter Laviolette to be the head coach of the Caps, that is, if there is anything left in the grape, he will be able to squeeze all of it out of it and get, you know, one more run for that group with the talent that they have. Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin are still on the ice in Pittsburgh, so you got to go over them to get there. I think the Islanders have built something really nice with what Lou has been able to put together with Barry Trotz, but this team is knocking on the door. And I know that you're probably ready to go home, but the question mark for the Canes comes down to the goalie. You know, people wanted to talk about why didn't they address the goaltending situation again? I brought it up, the salary cap. You know, there just wasn't a ton of room to go out there, and there was that glut of free agent goalies. But this is the team that 2 years ago made the playoffs with Peter Mrazek and Curtis McElhaney, and then last year they made the playoffs with Peter Mrazek and James Reimer. And it's a good enough duo to get you there. And if one of those guys, and I think that you would point to Peter Mrazek, could maybe take that next step up in their game, yeah, I think that this is a team absolutely that is knocking on the door of being a division champion with the pieces that they have in place. And they're a young team, Mark. You know, that's the other thing. They are, you look at the age group, you know, I walk in there and I'm an old man to those guys. It didn't used to be that way. But you look at how that team is built, and I think what they've been through the last 2 years, I think your assessment's kind of spot on. I think they're ready to not just be a playoff team, but to be a team that is contending for the division. And I honestly don't think it matters who will be in their division with them if everything gets jumbled or if we keep the Metro together.
And fans, listen, the Hurricanes are doing things the right way from Dundon on down. Just a lot of good things going on. I highly encourage you, if you want to watch the broadcast. Mike and Tripp do an amazing job. Mike, we really appreciate you joining us tonight on the Hockey Writers Live. Mike.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It was a pleasure. Anytime you guys want me back on, let me know, please.
Absolutely. No, fans, next week, episode 8 will be on. We'll announce the guests at that point. Make sure you hit like on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. Have a great night. We'll talk to you next week.